Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about the rest of season rankings for the 2022 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the four primary positions: top 36 running backs, top 36 wide receivers, top 16 quarterbacks, and tight ends for the rest of the 2022 year. The main reason, of course, that I wanted to present all of these players on screen is so that you have a visual representation as to where I have them ranked for the rest of the season, weeks 8 through 17, along with the idea as to who you should potentially be trading for. Again, a lot of you guys ask me down in the comment section via our live streams, Andrew, who should I be trading for? How much value does this prospect have in comparison to the rest of his own position? And this should give you a pretty clear indication as to how I feel for a half PPR scoring format, meeting everyone in the middle, whether you do play in a standard league or a full PPR league. So over the course of today's video, I will be filtering through 104 different players that are on screen, but I won't be able to talk about all of them. Of course, you guys know how long I like to talk about things. I'll be here for 2.5 hours. If you guys want to go ahead, you can join me tomorrow afternoon. I'll be live streaming from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on the channel. I can answer some questions in regards to why I have players ranked in some positions. But over the course of today's video, I'm just going to be talking about a few players at each position on every page, just to give you an indication as to which players I like that perhaps are not in a position you may have thought they should belong in. Some players that are higher ranked than you believe or potentially lower ranked than you believe, and why I kind of have them at that current position for the rest of the 2022 year. Do not forget, rankings are subject to change. As I was preparing to record this video and setting up graphics, I get information regarding Ja'Marr Chase avoiding the injured reserve, James Conner not playing in week 8. Those different factors obviously were taken into account and have set everything up, but this doesn't include, future injuries and all that kind of stuff. We'll talk about that, just kind of giving you some perspective. Before we begin, I want to thank you guys for supporting the channel. If you have not yet already, and you want more content like this on a daily basis, of course, be sure to subscribe. We're making daily fantasy football content in order to help you win a 2022 fantasy football championship. So besides today's videos, of course, yesterday's rest of season strength of schedule video that helps you get prepared for the fantasy football playoffs weeks 15 through 17 based on matchups in those given periods of time. We'll, of course, be live streaming tomorrow afternoon, like I mentioned, and Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Every Sunday morning, I have rankings on screen, available, ready to go to kind of get you guys ready for week 8, helping you set your lineups with updated rankings. So be sure to subscribe. Thank you very much. Also, like I was mentioning, the Saturday live stream, 1 to 3 p.m., what I also like to do throughout those streams is, besides answering questions as much as I possibly can, I do want to talk about potential prize pick entries. Last weekend, we had like 15 different ones that I felt pretty strong about. One of them was Jaylen Waddle going more than 60.5 receiving yards. This upcoming week, they currently have his number at 65.5 receiving yards via Prize Picks. So if you guys haven't checked out Prize Picks and you want to go ahead, play daily fantasy at your fingertips, go ahead, travel down to the description of the video and click on the link. When you sign up and make a first-time deposit using promo code Andrew, you'll be given a first deposit match up to $100. I highly suggest you go ahead and pick more on the Jaylen Waddle entry for this upcoming weekend based on receiving yards. The reason why, in the last 14 games that Jaylen Waddle has played with a healthy Tua, in which neither of them have left early due to an injury in those games, Jaylen Waddle's been able to surpass 65.5 receiving yards in 10 out of the last 14 games. There is a lot of potential for success here, and that is why I'm continuing to go after numbers like this. I'll be mentioning more entries like this tomorrow during the live stream, so go ahead, swing on by, and check out Prize Picks down in the description. Thank you very much. All right, let's talk about our rest of season running back rankings. Of course, you can see them on screen. If you guys like these kind of graphics, let me know. We could probably do this more often for the regular rankings, running back, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end throughout the week. Y'all just got to let me know down in the comment section. I know I like to present as much evidence in terms of statistics on screen when we go through our running back rankings, just to kind of give you an indication of the matchups and all that kind of stuff. But this could be another option. So let me know. Thank you very much. All right, so let's talk about this, right? Of course, a lot of the players on screen are automatics. Like Austin Ekeler, of course, leading the position by a pretty large margin in terms of fantasy points. Saquon Barkley, obviously, has been a stud this season, has the second easiest strength of schedule remaining for the 2022 season. So there's a lot of potential with these prospects. But let's talk about some players that you may not be, convinced about. Let's talk about Jonathan Taylor, number one, okay? I saw a couple comments in the comment section recently saying Jonathan Taylor should no longer be ranked anymore. And I thought to myself, have we all forgotten just how great Jonathan Taylor is at football? Have we all forgotten the level of excellence that he has proven, not only in 2020, his rookie season at the back end of the year after week 13, but also in 2021, even though he started off slowly, putting together an incredible season of production. Perhaps we've forgotten that, but just to give you an indication, it was just 48 days ago where consensusly Jonathan Taylor was the number 1 running back in a half PPR scoring format. And though he's currently at number 7, you got to understand, it was just 48 days ago where he was putting up 161 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown with relative ease in week 1. There is a lot of potential for this player. Don't sleep on him, guys. Go ahead, trade for him. Also, Alvin Kamara, another one of these players that for some reason doesn't get as much love as he should. Alvin Kamara, as of late, in the course of the last 3 weeks, now that he's been healthy, considering he wasn't healthy in the beginning of the year with the rib injury, in the last 3 weeks, he has seen 24 targets that have led to 19 catches and 172 receiving yards with Andy Dalton. The fact that Andy Dalton is once again getting his start, even though Jameis Winston suits up and is ready on the sideline to play, leads to me believing that Andy Dalton is most likely going to be the starter for this team rest of the way, unless something tragic is to occur. So if we are in fact in a situation where Alvin Kamara is going to continue to get himself in the conversation of 6+ receptions per game, that's the Alvin Kamara of old. That's the Alvin Kamara that we know and love with Drew Brees back in 2020 when he was the number 1 overall back in the season. All he needs is touchdowns, and I can guarantee you we're not too far away from those multi-touchdown games from Alvin Kamara. Now, another player that you may be a little bit skeptical on is Ramondre Stevenson at number 11. Ramondre Stevenson is a guy that I love this offseason, and I did not expect purely that when Damien Harris came back on Monday Night Football, that Damien Harris would be deemed pretty much irrelevant, playing 9 snaps, touching the ball, 2-3 times on the ground. That in itself gave me all the confidence to continue to trust Ramondre Stevenson for the rest of this season. Again, since week 3, he's been the number 3 overall running back in a half PPR scoring format in terms of total points contributed to fantasy managers. As of right now, considering the offense is built behind the idea of running the ball behind this incredible offensive line, and of course, dumping it off to Ramondre Stevenson when either of these quarterbacks, Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi, are in trouble, it will continue to lead to his overall success in fantasy football. We know how much value running backs from New England hold. And as of right now, if we're leaning in the direction of Damien Harris and the trade rumors that we're hearing, potentially them moving him and or him getting more of a limited role within this offense in comparison to Ramondre, he's easily top 12 by the rest of the season, considering what he has done since week 3. Now, another player I wanted to mention on the screen, and the final player before we move on to ranks 19 through 36 at the running back position, is Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert, as of right now, has the easiest strength of schedule for the remaining half of the regular fantasy football season, weeks 8 through 14. Raheem Mostert has 5 matchups in the coming 6 weeks that are all top 5 matchups in terms of fantasy points allowed to opposing running backs in a half PPR scoring format. If you want to hear more information on that, I posted a video yesterday that you can check out, rest of season strength of schedule. Raheem Mostert, by far and away, is going to dominate, whether it's Houston, Chicago, Detroit. There are such easy matchups here for the taking. Los Angeles Chargers that Raheem Mostert is going to roll through. And when he is healthy and doing that, by all means, he's easily a guy that could, in my opinion, be a league winner when it's all said and done in the 2022 year. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the second half of the running back conversation. Of course, we have Cordero Patterson all the way to 36. We have Antonio Gibson. Now, a couple things that I wanted to mention first and foremost. There have been a lot of trade rumors regarding some of these players. Specifically, we have heard trade rumors regarding Antonio Gibson. Of course, he is on the trade block. We've heard rumors regarding the Rams bringing in a running back that could definitely affect Darrell Henderson. Of course, the movement of Antonio Gibson would immediately affect Brian Robinson. We've also heard rumors regarding Kareem Hunt, whether or not he is going to potentially move. We don't know the current status of James Conner with his rib injury, Gus Edwards going down last night with a hamstring injury, and Ezekiel Elliott with his knee. There are so many question marks in this region, but as of right now, I'm pretty confident in how I have it kind of valued going forward with all that information and variables taken into account, along with strength of schedule, skill of the player, and of course, total opportunity that they're being given on a weekly basis. So let's go ahead and let's talk about the other half of the coin in regarding that Dallas Cowboys backfield, just because we mentioned Zeke just moments ago. Let's talk about Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard could very easily, in the next week plus here, get himself into a conversation that if in fact Zeke is going to miss a couple weeks, even though he's only ever missed one career game due to injury since 2016, there is a very good chance that Tony Pollard could supplant him as a starter for this team. And if that is going to potentially take place, Tony Pollard would run away with his job. We've talked about this. Tony Pollard has a 5.6 yard per carry average this year. He's only number 2 behind DeAndre Swift in yards per carry after contact. He's just dominating across the board. His efficiency levels is extremely high. And in terms of running back targets out of this backfield, they're all going in the direction of Tony Pollard this season. He's got himself a very good opportunity. It's just a matter of how much Zeke we're going to see and how long he's going to potentially be out as to what his value kind of trends in terms of helping the overall value of Tony Pollard. These rankings from like 25 through 36 are going to be extremely fluid in the next couple weeks, whether it's injuries, whether it's waiver wire guys coming out of nowhere that may get themselves into this conversation, of course, and the trades that I mentioned earlier, kind of throwing a wrench into this entire conversation. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and move on. Let's begin talking about our top 36 wide receivers, our 1 through 18s on screen, of course, leading with Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill. The primary thing I wanted to mention regarding those 4 wide receivers is the fact that all 4 of those guys thus far this season are each averaging over 100 receiving yards per game. Can you imagine that? For those of you who drafted a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds, congratulations. If it was any of those 4 guys, of course, you found yourself a lot of success thus far, and it's not slowing up anytime soon. But let's talk about, besides those 4 guys, let's talk about Ja'Marr Chase. I currently have him at number 6. Obviously, we got indication earlier today, before today's video, that he is going to be avoiding the injured reserve. The injured reserve typically holds you out for about 4 weeks. This gives me the indication that he's only going to miss 2 games, which keeps him in that top 6 category because he's going to avoid having to miss at least 3 to 4. Considering they have 2 weeks here, Cleveland, and then the following game, and then they hit a bye week, after those 3 weeks, he probably then returns. That is why they avoided putting him on the injured reserve. I know he's dealing with a hip injury along with a shoulder injury, but if in fact we're going to have him ready to go in just 3 weeks, only missing 2 games, I still think he's one of these dynamic players you want to keep on roster. You don't want to technically move him. You just have to survive in the next couple weeks with whatever you can based off waivers. And hopefully if you had Tyler Boyd as some sort of handcuff option within that offense, he's going to have some massive performances coming up. Now, another player I wanted to mention is Chris Olave. You may not be thinking that Chris Olave deserves his current standing, but the fact that we continue to see so much success from Chris Olave with whether it's Jameis Winston and or Andy Dalton, and continuing to be a relevant option within this offense, with Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry confirmed to having missed another game going into week 8, that's not going to be the last time we hear those 2 guys missing games. They're going to continue to do that, and that's going to continue to trend. Whether they come back and get injured again, it does not matter. Chris Olave has established himself as a very dependable wide receiver in fantasy football, and we cannot ignore those facts. So we're going to go ahead, keep him at number 14. Of course, T. Higgins next to him. With Ja'Marr Chase only missing 2 games, he doesn't make that big of a jump, but of course, he still has a lot of value. Like you guys all know, I love T. Higgins. I've loved him all season, whether it's the offseason or regular season. Another player I wanted to mention before we close out and continue on from this list. Of course, we don't know how long Deebo Samuel's hamstring is going to take, along with Keenan Allen. Those guys have definitely been dealing with injuries throughout the courses of their career. We're going to have to go ahead and keep those monitored. But Devonta Smith, before we move on, Devonta Smith is a wide receiver that I mentioned on Wednesday's wide receiver video as a guy that I want to go ahead and trade for. Devonta Smith, since week 4, has had himself 39 targets in comparison to A.J. Brown's 40 targets. So pretty much identical target share between the 2 wide receivers. Yet, Devonta Smith has 10 more fantasy points scored since week 2. Now, you may be thinking, Andrew, it's got to be touchdowns, right? No, actually, they both have identical amount of touchdowns. The only difference, Vanker, in fact, is Devonta Smith has 1 less target, but 10 more receptions and 50 more receiving yards. He's far more efficient in the opportunities he's been given. And that's not to say that, of course, his counterpart and his teammate, A.J. Brown, can't go ahead and elevate himself to those levels of consistency, because I expect him to do so. But I truly believe as of right now, Devonta Smith has to be respected as a guy that maybe we want to go out and trade for. Because as of right now, since week 2, he's the number 1 wide receiver for this team, bar none. And I think there's going to be a lot of potential upside considering the strength of schedule at the quarterback position. Check out that video I posted yesterday in regards to Jalen Hurts' rest of the season and how much value Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown have going forward as primary options within this offense. All right, moving on. Let's talk about our number 19 through 36. Again, a lot of players here are going to be in flux. There's a lot of liquidity to this overall rankings list because of injuries. We don't know when we're going to see Mike Williams, DK Metcalf, Marquise Hollywood Brown return at a full healthy capacity to be contributing factors to our fantasy efforts on a weekly basis. Now, the expectation is that Marquise Hollywood Brown would come off the injured reserve when his injured reserve stint of 4 weeks has surpassed. The assumption with Mike Williams and the currently diagnosed high ankle sprain would be 4 weeks, potentially 5, going forward, barring no setback. As for DK Metcalf and what he's dealing with his knee, of course, that's a shot in the dark. We're completely blind on that matter until the team and the organization gives us some light in regards to that. But outside of that, there's a lot of studs on this list. There's a lot of league winners here potentially, whether it's Amari Cooper, whether it's Juju Smith-Schuster, who has pretty much caught fire over the course of the last couple weeks, whether it's George Pickens, who currently leads the receivers for the Pittsburgh Steelers in terms of receiving yards this season, despite the fact that Deontay Johnson dominates this team in terms of total targets on a weekly basis. There's a lot of potential value to be had with these wide receiver prospects. And going forward, again, a lot of these guys are going to be in those scenarios where, yes, their quarterback play isn't incredible, like Terry McLaurin, like Michael Pittman Jr., like potentially Jerry Jeudy, unfortunately. But it's purely going to be a matter of whether they can navigate those poor, inconsistent performances from their quarterbacks, like DJ Moore has done his entire career, like Terry McLaurin as well. If they can navigate those, then of course they will continue to find success in that wide receiver 3 capacity, low end wide receiver 2 capacity. All right, with all that covered, let's go ahead and let's transition to the tight end conversation, beginning with our top 16 tight ends, shall we? All right, so as you can see on screen, the tight end position at the top, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews when healthy, George Kittle, Dallas Goedert. These are the main guys of the position. Darren Waller when healthy. These are absolute studs. And if you want to trade for a Travis Kelce, who in a half PPR right now, I think is like averaging 17.5 fantasy points per game. Mark Andrews, despite the fact that, of course, has been injured as the last couple of weeks. Prior to that, was in that same category. George Kittle's getting back on track. Of course, Dallas Goedert's been a consistent option all year. Darren Waller, when healthy, is a completely different machine than what he has shown as of late. But outside of those studs, those brand name guys, let's talk about Pat Freiermuth, the number 6. Pat Freiermuth thus far this season, in terms of fantasy points per game, is currently technically the number 10 overall tight end. But when you go ahead and you do a little bit of a deeper dive, as of the full 5 games he has played, he is averaging 7.8 targets, 5.2 receptions, 59.6 receiving yards, and 0.2 receiving touchdowns, which is 9.76 fantasy points per game. Now, the reason why I say the 5 full games he has played is because there was a game earlier this year where he obviously missed because he missed half the game due to a concussion because he had to leave early, and he missed the following week with that said concussion. So if in fact we're going to be in a conversation where we get a full healthy Pat Freiermuth the rest of the way within this offense, that when he is healthy, regardless of whether it's Mitchell Trubisky and or Kenny Pickett, he is getting heavily targeted. If you go ahead and take his 9.76 fantasy point per game average and line that up with a bunch of other tight ends based on when they've been healthy in the games that they've missed and kind of line it up accordingly, he is in that top 6 to 7 conversation. That is why I feel so confident with him in this manner. Now, the tight end that follows him is Gerald Everett, who currently has the best rest of season strength of schedule at the tight end position from weeks 8 through 14. And the fact that we have Mike Williams and Keenan Allen both dealing with injuries. Of course, Mike Williams recently with that ankle sprain. Of course, we have Keenan Allen still kind of trying to work back from that hamstring strain. We have Josh Palmer, who recently missed the game with a concussion, along with Donald Parham, who recently missed the game with a concussion. There have been so many injuries to this offense, and quite frankly, there's a chance that Justin Herbert's not fully healthy either, considering his rib injury that he sustained earlier this year against the Kansas City Chiefs. But the fact of the matter is, Gerald Everett continues to get targets, and when he is going to be such a pivotal part of this offense with so many players missing on a weekly basis due to injuries, I expect to see Gerald Everett continue to maintain his consistency that he's put forward thus far. Again, we saw a lot of utilization last year from the tight end position within the Chargers organization, whether it was Jared Cook or Donald Parham. But Gerald Everett is very much so filling into that Jared Cook role and going even further beyond that in terms of targets and utilization and overall upside. I think he's a great play rest of the way, and that is why we have him at that current position. Of course, you see Taysom Hill, Dalton Schultz at number 10 and 11. Taysom Hill is a very interesting play. Of course, there are going to be some scenarios where he may not get those touchdowns, and when he doesn't, it's going to be brutal. But quite frankly, a lot of these other tight ends, whether it's Hayden Hurst or Evan Ingram or TJ Hawkinson or even Tyler Higbee, when they don't score touchdowns, well, Higbee hasn't even scored a touchdown this year, but when they don't score touchdowns, they're not relevant either within that given week. That is the biggest difference maker. And when we're talking about someone who has quarterback / tight end flexibility, he still is a very valuable option considering how many routes he's running as of late and how much utilization he's getting down in the red zone. Now, the final tight end I wanted to mention before we close out and move on to quarterbacks is David Njoku. David Njoku is going to miss probably 2 to 4 weeks here. Hopefully, it's going to be the shorter half of that so we can get him back early and get him back on track, because you got to remember, he was on pace based on what he produced from weeks 3 through 7 to pretty much put up 80 catches over 1,000 receiving yards and be one of the best tight ends of the year. Unfortunately, having sustained the injury, it's going to slow him up. But once he comes back and we get Deshaun Watson into this lineup, in the same way that Amari Cooper has a lot of upside rest of the way, David Njoku's overall upside also increases, because even though Jacoby Brissett loves to target his tight ends, so does Deshaun Watson. You go back to the Houston days, whether it's Darren Fells, Jordan Akins, there was a lot of tight end production every single year. They were pretty much scoring 8 to 10 touchdowns per season from tight ends alone within that offense. So if David Njoku's healthy, back, ready to go, after he misses maybe 2 to 4 weeks here, we're going to be in a conversation where he's going to be able to reclaim that top spot. Just keep him in your IR. Don't drop him. All right, moving on. Let's close out today's video by talking about a couple quarterbacks here. Of course, we have Josh Allen at the top. Josh Allen right now, in comparison to majority of the field, is quite frankly averaging over 10 fantasy points per game, more than a lot of these quarterbacks. Now, when you're doing it at such a high capacity, and he's potentially on pace to break the record for most fantasy points scored by a quarterback in a given season, 4-point per passing touchdown or more. I mean, we got to keep him up there, right? We follow that with Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson. I mean, the fact that Lamar Jackson last night, guys, was able to produce as well as he did on the ground through the air with no Mark Andrews, with no Gus Edwards, and with no Rashad Bateman at full healthy capacities. I mean, that is just... it just speaks volumes as to what kind of fantasy machine he is. There's a reason why over the course of the last couple of weeks, for those of you who tuned in to some of those live streams, I've been saying, please trade for Lamar Jackson, because he's going to get back on track. And when he does, it's going to be nuclear. And that is what he has done over the course, week 8 thus far. And going forward, when those guys get healthy and those pieces are back, I'm expecting a lot of production from Lamar Jackson. Now, as for Joe Burrow, even though Jamar Chase is going to miss like 2 weeks, I'm not too worried about it. He'll be fine. Let's talk about Kyler Murray. Of course, Call of Duty just recently came out. And all jokes aside, we got to hope that Kyler Murray keeps himself focused. Because quite frankly, the opportunity that he has rest of season with DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Hollywood Brown, Zach Ertz, a healthy Connor, Eno Benjamin, Rondell Moore, Robbie Anderson, a pretty decent offensive line. I mean, quite frankly, when you compare him to other offensive pieces, he might have one of the best offenses surrounding him in the entire National Football League. D-Hop, Marquise Brown, Zach Ertz is no joke. On top of the fact that you have Robbie Anderson and Rondell Moore as just like, hey, if you want to use them, you can. There are other offenses in this league that do not have number 4 or 5 options ready to go. Like, if those guys were on the Packers, Aaron Rodgers would be in a far more advantageous position rest of the way in comparison to his current ranking at number 15. Either way, hopefully Kyler gets it done because he's got a lot of pieces surrounding him. They've given him all the potential options that he doesn't deserve any more excuses. Stay healthy, run the ball, and utilize those weapons that surround you. The last couple guys I wanted to mention, hopefully Justin Herbert stays healthy this year. Tom Brady, obviously, I trust in Tom Brady. Mainly because when you look at guys like Derek Carr, Tua Tagovailoa, Geno Smith, Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, their best weeks in some capacities are Tom Brady's worst weeks. There is so much upside within this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. There's a reason why Tom Brady set career highs in terms of passing yardage, passing attempts, passing completion percentage last year. It's just a matter of them getting healthy. And when they are healthy up front at wide receiver, they're going to be in a position to succeed. And I know it hasn't been that as of late, but even with last night's performance, the yardage is there. It just needs to go ahead and click in a couple more touchdowns, and we're off and away with a top 10 quarterback in Tom Brady. Outside of that, the rest of these prospects, like from Kirk Cousins to Geno Smith, they're pretty solid. Guys who are going to be relatively consistent, assuming the pieces around them stay healthy. As for Trevor Lawrence, Aaron Rodgers, Daniel Jones, Aaron Rodgers has been pretty consistent all year, about 16 fantasy points per game. Trevor Lawrence has himself ebbs and flows along with Daniel Jones, but they have so much upside based on what they have surrounding them. Their ability to run the ball, those are the biggest differential factors that keep them in this conversation. Of course, I would have loved to have put Justin Fields in the top 16. I just don't know if we're going to continue to see him run the ball 12 to 15 times a game. And I'm hoping he does so and he finds that yardage, because if he does, by all means, Justin Fields is probably going to be in this conversation rest of the way. As long as that offense, Eberflus, they're going to allow him to be Justin Fields and not maintain him as a pocket passing quarterback, which he is just not. That is not where his physical advantages lie. When you accentuate the running game by allowing him to be a threat with his legs on a downly basis, of course, you get yourself a pretty good product beating, not even just beating, embarrassing the New England Patriots on national television. Either way, that is going to cover it for us today. Those are our rest of season rankings for the 2022 year. Hopefully you guys appreciate today's content. If you do, be sure to click the like button down below. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comment section. I've been answering those at a far greater capacity and our rate over the course of the last couple weeks, so let me know. Also, do not forget, tomorrow 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I'll be live streaming here on the channel if you have any questions regarding these kind of players. And for example, if you have questions regarding week 8 matchups and or who to start, you can join us Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I live stream here every Sunday morning with the singular purpose of trying to continue to give you guys rankings on screen for free to help you guys out. So be sure to join us Sunday morning. I appreciate you guys. Also, check out PrizePicks. Like we mentioned earlier, one of the best entries for this week is to go ahead and pick more on Jaylen Waddle with any other player that you feel comfortable with. We'll talk about a couple other entries that I feel very comfortable with tomorrow during our live stream. Check out PrizePicks. Use promo code Andrew today, and when you do so, you'll be given a first deposit match up to $100. Until tomorrow's live stream, I'll see you guys. Peace.